It's great love. It's great love. It's great love proclaiming everyone coming to entreat you. I'm talking to all humanity around. Talking to humanity. Even if you don't believe. Even if you don't believe. Let's talk about the great love of all mankind. Oh, yeah. If you can't talk about it. Love is a light that casts away darkness. It finds its way into every heart. Pour your soul like water flows to sea. Then we will be all we're meant to be. Shalom, I am Rabbi Shaul Praver. You're watching Rabbi Rock. Welcome. The cantorial art. This is the beautiful music that we hear in the synagogue, the liturgy chanted to beautiful melodies. It's a hidur mitzvah. That means to make the commandments beautiful, make the Torah lifestyle beautiful. When you come to the synagogue, you should be inspired by song. Whether it's a solo of the cantor, whether it's a group singing together of the congregation, it should be beautiful. And today we celebrate a really fabulous cantorial artist. That is Deborah Katchko-Gray. Comes from an illustrious family of cantors, 4 generations. And with no further ado, we welcome Cantor Deborah Katchko-Gray to Rabbi Rock.
Thank you.
It's great to have you here.
So wonderful to be here.
So 4 generations of cantors, and your Adolf Katchko was one of the great cantors from the 30s and the 40s, from the golden era of the cantorial artists. And how are you related to him?
He is my grandfather.
Wow.
Cantor Adolf Katchko was a name that I grew up with that was kind of something to be revered and something awesome. I was only 18 months old when he passed away, but my father was a wonderful cantor and my mother was his accompanist. So they used to play his music all the time.
Yeah.
And I used to just sit on the stairs and listen to them play this incredible music. And it filled me with something very special. And
Wow.
when I went to college and thought that I would be maybe the next Jewish Bonnie Raitt or Jewish Judy Collins, something like that, I realized through some wonderful guidance of some mentors that this is really where I belong.
Okay, now wait. Let's take a few steps back. You didn't have the expectation or the encouragement to become a cantor yourself?
Absolutely not. I grew up in the early 70s, as I like to tell my kids. It was not the 60s.
Right.
It was the early 70s.
Okay.
And it was the era of the singer-songwriter,
Yeah.
James Taylor, Judy Collins. These were my musical idols.
Joan Baez?
Not so much Joan Baez, but Judy Collins and
Okay.
James Taylor,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay.
Joan Baez, a little too,
Okay.
a little too much of that machine gun sound. But I loved the music of that era. And I went to Boston University, really to play the coffee houses.
Okay.
And that was my intention, to be very Jewish, but do something with music. But there were no women cantors
Okay.
that I knew of. In college, I found out about 1 or 2 women cantors, but there was nobody doing anything traditional.
Would your parents have encouraged you to be a cantor if there were jobs, if it was a profession?
If it was a profession, maybe, because sometimes it can be difficult. And my father was a very sweet and sensitive soul. He basically just said yes to everybody, but you know, he could be. You have to have big shoulders, and you have to have a strong sense of who you are. And I think they were afraid that maybe it wasn't a wonderful job for a nice Jewish girl.
Too challenging, too many, too demanding, and
Maybe a little scary, you know, to work for a board of trustees and a ritual committee. I think there were years when things weren't as wonderful for cantors. It depends on the climate of the synagogue, obviously.
Yes.
What kind of mood there is, and what the values are, what the philosophy of the synagogue and the rabbi, and all that comes into play.
Okay.
You know.
Now, you went to Boston University, and you were influenced by a very great man, Elie Wiesel.
Elie Wiesel.
And tell us about that, how you met him. And he was a professor of yours?
The greatest. Elie Wiesel was the most wonderful professor I ever had. At his very first class, there were too many students to fit in the room. And so he had to have a selection, which made him very uncomfortable because he didn't want to have to do something and have to tell someone yes and someone no. That brought up all sorts of bad feelings for him, as you can imagine.
As a Holocaust survivor,
Absolutely.
being selected for life, being selected for death.
Of course. And here he had to select students. You can be in my class and you can't. So he had us all write down on a 3x5 note card why we wanted to take his class. And so I wrote something about coming from a family of cantors, which right away sparked something for him because he was a choral conductor in France after the war. He's a wonderful singer, and he loves music.
I heard he has a very
loves
sweet
choral
voice.
music. I've had the honor of singing with him several times, and it's wonderful. So he liked that right away, and I did say something about wanting to teach children about Judaism. I was in the School of Education, and I knew I wanted to pass on something. I wasn't exactly sure what, but I wanted to pass on this love of Judaism that I had, and certainly love of Jewish music. However that would be. At the time, the option was really not for a traditional woman cantor.
You were 19 years old, so
yeah,
that was pretty good focus at that
right,
age.
Yeah. So anyway, when he read that, he said, "My door will always be open to you."
Wow.
And that meant that not only could I take any of his classes, but I could sit in on doctoral thesis classes, master's seminars. I could sit in on anything. He literally meant his door was open.
Now, where was your father a cantor?
My father was always a part-time cantor, and he had such a wonderful way of saying it. He used to say he dealt in spirits because he had a liquor store during the week, and then he was a cantor on Friday nights. He always found a rather small conservative synagogue that didn't have a lot of b'nai mitzvah.
Okay. Yes.
So
young children to teach for the
right, and he didn't have a lot of bar mitzvah services. So he would do Friday night. That was the big thing.
Yes.
And Shlosh Regalim, the 3 festivals, and then he would do the high holidays. So it was good for him, and I used to go with him many Friday nights. Interesting, because he worked on Friday night. He would leave my mother in the liquor store, and he would go. He worked in Meriden for 9 years and New Britain for 10 years. He was also at Greenwich at Temple Shalom. He was their first cantor, full-time cantor.
Wow.
And then he was part-time after that because he had the liquor store. But I used to go with him as often as I could because I felt so bad that he was alone on Shabbat. And our Shabbat dinner was, somewhere on the road. He would stop at a restaurant. And I always felt, bad for him that he
was all alone like that.
Lonely.
Yeah.
And then he got to synagogue. He would always get there a little bit early. He would lay down on the couch and then get up and sing like a prophet. And it was so beautiful. And then he'd have another hour and a half ride home. So I tried to accompany him as much as I could. As a result of that, I've made a big deal about Shabbat dinner for my kids and my whoever's around, and my rabbi and his wife are always welcome. And my door is open for Shabbat. I always try and do a big deal, make a great dinner, homemade whole wheat challah with raisins. I want my kids to know that it's something special.
Good for you.
And something sweet, because I always felt bad for my dad that he was at some roadside restaurant on Shabbat.
It's kind of what a job for a nice Jewish boy, huh?
Right, and maybe that's why they said, I don't know if this is a job for a nice Jewish girl, but I've never had to have Shabbat dinner on the road. I'm always in my home. It's been a full-time job for me.
Now you are the cantor now in Richfield, Connecticut.
Temple Sherith, Israel.
Tell us a little bit about your shul.
It's wonderful. It is. I feel like I'm home. I've been doing this for 30 years. I'm 49. I've started when I was 19.
Wonderful.
And this is beginning my 8th year with Rabbi John Haddon.
He's wonderful.
The most wonderful. He's a dream.
He did the bris of our kids.
Yes, I know.
My favorite rabbi.
He's the greatest.
Yeah.
He's just the greatest. He was a cantor, so he appreciates music. he understands the role of music in a service. He elevates everything I do. He comments throughout the service and compliments me, which is so unusual.
It's very nice to see that.
Unbelievable. He will take a moment and then just even give it its space.
Yeah.
As if that was a sacred moment, and let's respect it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's very unusual. We sing together. We harmonize. He suggests music. We're really a team.
I noticed
It's the greatest feeling in the world, and I would say that for the last 8 years, every time I walk into a service, it's just one of, wow, something magical is going to happen.